Happy to tackle that, and I have a gift for you along those lines. But first, I just wanted to point out what and reinforce what the general said. More Americans die from drugs and fentanyl and transnational crime than in any other type of conflict around the world. So this notion that the United States reasserting its leadership in the Western Hemisphere isn't necessarily new. I'd call it overdue. And Colombia and the United States worked quite well with each other under Plan Colombia in the 1990s, in the 2000s, defeated the FARC narco-insurgents. Then we see the transnational gangs that have taken over Haiti, where the United States spent over $1 billion in 2024 to take on. We've now asserted a new UN-mandated gang suppression force with a more offensive mandate, and we've seen Maduro, who was basically a state sponsor and state backer of narco-terrorism. He is now removed, and you know who is not wringing their hands? The 8 million Venezuelan refugees, a larger refugee crisis than Syria, mind you, that was destabilizing the region. And my former constituents in Congress, the Venezuelans who are seeking asylum in Florida, with tears of joy, thanking us. So asserting U.S. leadership has been welcomed, and we're hearing again and again behind the scenes, thank you, from a number of countries, 7 of whom will meet with the president in the coming weeks. To the broader point, look, the president has been clear, and my mandate is clear. We needed to put the UN on a diet. Everyone agrees that reform was needed. We are pushing hard for the UN to go back to basics, to that peacemaking and peacekeeping function that was core to its founding. And the biggest problem we've seen is that it's trying to do too much for everyone and be everything to every nation. So what has been a result of this initial push? The UN has agreed to its first budget cut in its history of 15%, just approved this last December. Nearly 3,000 headquarters bureaucrats will be cut. 18% overall personnel cut, 25% peacekeeping cut. We're going to get the UN back to fit to purpose. Again, despite the hand-wringing I hear in the media, what I was just in Geneva with a number of humanitarian agencies, and again, we heard, please keep up the sustained pressure. And I'll just say, you know, we've heard a lot about NATO and the future of multilateralisms and our engagement. Who here would argue that NATO is not in a better place now than it was 10 years ago when less than 7 of its contributors met the bare minimum? And with the president's leadership, we are going to reform the UN to get it fit for purpose and back to basics, much like we've done for NATO. He will do for the UN what he's done for NATO the last 10 years.
Is the president's goal, is the administration's goal to strengthen the UN so that it continues to be more effectively at the fulcrum of a global order? Or is it the goal to also create alternative institutions? I note that the president has created a board of peace, which has a very different membership, and it's... I have to, wait. Because that's a bit of inaccurate information. I won't call it misinformation. The United Nations Security Council created the Board of Peace unanimously with countries such as Pakistan, our friends in the UK, France, and others. So attached to that was the president's 20-point peace plan, which I saw many leaders who are here today show up at Sharm el-Sheikh in relief to sign, because we have the ceasefire in place, because hostages are being released. We now have humanitarian aid going in at levels that the entire world was demanding So is it going to work? I hope so, but I can tell you what wasn't working, either Hamas in charge or endless war. So the president has charted a third way, and to the point of the Board of Peace, it built on having our Gulf Arab friends, Muslim majority nations such as Turkey, Pakistan, Indonesia, involved. And so to answer your question, what I'd call it is focused multilateralism. We've seen it through this institution that the United Nations blessed. We just saw it through the Critical Minerals Conference. We just saw the first direct flight between Azerbaijan and Armenia in its history, and the first wheat shipments flowing through those countries from Kazakhstan. So I guess I'll just stop with, I have to push back on the premise, the world on the brink, which I think was the name of this panel. We are returning the world from the brink, where it was 18 months ago between Ukraine, Gaza, Iran racing for a nuke, the Houthis shutting down the Suez Canal, the refugee crisis in South America, and on and on. So if you focus on the facts and the results, and if we have to reform multilateralism that hasn't been reformed, frankly, in 80 years, then I think that should be welcomed by the world. And in that, guise, I do have my...
Is that for me?
Make the UN Great Again, otherwise known as Munga hat, to... I brought one for everyone, but they've been so popular. I have one for you, Lanny. We could pass it.
There you go. Thank you. I think we'll give that to Carlos. Luckily, I don't have to respond to your accusations of misinformation because I have the absolute best person to answer this. Do you see the Board of Peace as a strengthening of the overall constellation of global organizations? And if so, why isn't Europe, actively pushing it? Let's start there, and then we'll go on.
Yes, it is true that the United Nations Security Council resolution foresaw a Board of Peace, but it also foresaw that it's limited in time until 2027. It's foresaw that Palestinians have a say, and it also was referring to Gaza, whereas the Board of Peace, as the charter is not referring to any of those. So I think, in the Security Council there is a resolution, but this Board of Peace does not reflect. And one thing, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, it is very good that you want to reform the international order. What is, I think, for the rest of us, majority of us, important that in the multilateral system there is equality of states. I mean, what Faisal was saying as well, if we reform, then we should actually take into account the world as it currently is, where all the states are equal, and also that nobody is above the law. That's why I'm talking about accountability, that if we have rules that we have agreed to, then, if somebody breaches, even the most powerful countries breach those laws, there's also, some kind of accountability and for these people, because what we see in the world is that very often you have like one guy who decides to start a war against another. So he sends a lot of brothers, fathers, sons to kill other brothers, fathers and sons. And there's no accountability for that one decision that actually gets so many people killed. And I think, if we're talking about the reform of the multilateral system, and I agree that it's good that it's under fire, then that's why it's also on the front of these debates, but we should respect that all states are equal.
Sure. Here's just one thing I would ask everyone to consider. All states are absolutely equal within the UN Charter. The difference, and why the United States is pushing for reform, is the U.S. has historically paid more than 180 countries combined in terms of our dues, assessments, and voluntary giving. So, of course, when I have to look at mechanics, doctors, nurses, firemen that formerly in my district who are struggling to get their kids to school, but yet I have UN officials who are flying business class around the world, I can't believe that there is an argument against reform. But on the Board of Peace, look, I would just say this for the people of Gaza, for Israel and the region, there's also a cost to status quo. Status quo was not working. The alternatives were Hamas in charge or Israel in endless conflict. And instead, we have charted a different way, backed by the the countries of the region, and you have 8,000 troops that have now been contributed, publicly announced by Indonesia. You will see more in the coming weeks, and you have billions of dollars that, frankly, some countries were not comfortable putting completely through the UN system. So we have a funding mechanism that's now set up under this Board of Peace Charter, in addition to the Palestinian Technocratic Committee.
I'm conscious that we need to open to questions, but Ambassador, I want you to take the lens up a little bit. And you make a lot of very good points about the need to reform and the need to tighten belts, but at a big picture level.
But no one was doing it. We've talked about it endlessly, strongly worded letters, a lot of hand-wringing. No one was doing it, and when we're doing it,
Ambassador, I take your point, but if you listen to Chancellor Merz, the questions that we are all asking ourselves is the old system, at a big picture system of multilateral rules, engagement, alliances, is changing, and we are wondering what the United States, where it wants to go and what it wants to do. And is it a world of might is right, great power politics, unconstrained? Because, and this is the question to you, does the President believe in a multilateral system where there are rules that would constrain the United States or not?
NATO is stronger because of our leadership and push for the reforms that were badly needed, namely the contributions. The UN will be stronger at the end of this process. The status quo was unsustainable and not working in places like Gaza or Azerbaijan, Armenia. You have to ask yourself, why were we 18 months ago in so many active wars around the world? And I think it's a fair question for the President to say, why hasn't the UN been able to resolve issues like a border dispute between Cambodia and Thailand, or Azerbaijan, Armenia, or we could walk around the world, or Kashmir and India and Pakistan, where we faced a very serious nuclear escalation. So what I'm hearing outside of forums like this privately is, thank you for American leadership. America has to lead. If we have to have more focused plurilateral or focused multilateral organizations to do so, I think that should be perfectly acceptable if we're getting the results that results in peace and security.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I think that was actually very clear. Questions? Lady here in the fourth row. If you could identify yourself and keep it very brief.